Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start, a few house rules. Make sure that your cell phone is either off or on silent. The bathrooms are down the hall to the right, and we have 4 students who are ushers if there is need of anything. At this point, we would like you to stand for the national anthem. Please sit. What a very warm welcome with that rain for this celebration this afternoon. I bring salutations to the following persons. Professor Camille Naki, professor at the Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand, and the founder and director of the Caribbean Research Methodologies Network. To Professor Festus Yobo, Vice President, Research, Academic and Student Affairs. To Professor Valerie Stout, Independent Researcher. To Dr. Mark Jackman, Program Leader, Center for Education Programs at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Nisha Selvan Ramkissoon, my co-host, Assistant Professor. And we welcome you this afternoon, all of you who are gathered here. A very warm welcome. I now introduce you to Dr. Nisha Selvan Ramkissoon, who will bring our greetings.
It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Festus Yobo, the University of Trinidad and Tobago's Vice President for Research, Academic and Student Affairs. He holds a BSc from the University of Leeds and a PhD from Cambridge University, and has held research fellowships in the chemical engineering departments of Cambridge, Leeds, and Bradford universities. His research work then was directly applicable to pharmaceutical and chemical defense industries and to solving important industry problems. At UTT, Professor Yobo taught in the Department of Process and Utilities Engineering for a number of years, catering to the needs of students from diverse backgrounds and abilities. Professor Yobo is on record as saying that his engagement in leading various groups of people with different ethnic, cultural, and social backgrounds has taught him that communication is vital to carrying the people with you and seeing through even big ideas, which are obviously beneficial. So he is, of course, well poised to start off this evening's launch of a big idea. That is, affirming Caribbean methodologies. Professor Yobo, I invite you to open this afternoon's proceedings.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this occasion. I'm humbled. I mean, it's a big occasion. In my own life, I remember when I was a young person interested in ideas, then it dawned on me that one of the key problems in Western thought was really how we come to know things. Okay, it's a key question. And in all that discourse, if you remove Descartes and the Cartesian devil from this, then the key thing was, how do we affirm knowledge? And that is really through method, okay? And so having chosen this as your key, research point is really extremely important for me, okay? And really the point was that it's the, how shall I put, the viewpoints are very important, okay? And I think when you do this in the Caribbean, then you've got different ethnicities. So you half the battle is won, okay? In the Caribbean, you've got all the different ethnicities, so that is one. Then secondly, when you do it the way you're doing it, somebody from New Zealand, which I consider the North, I hope you don't mind, and here the South or Middle, then you've got the viewpoints from those two as well. And the way you've gone about it, okay, have UE, are there any people from UE here? UE? No? Well, a relationship between UTT and UE, so you have UE perspective and UTT perspective. So I think you'll be onto something good, okay. Now let me come back to my my speech, as it were. So Professor Ember is not here. Professor Camille Naki, New Zealand, welcome. Professor Valerie Stout is my old friend, but perhaps also my old adversary. Welcome. Okay. Dr. Mark Jackman, where is he? Yes, welcome. Dr. Nisha Sevlon Ramkissoon, of course, welcome. And Dr. Margaret Chatu, we know each other very well, so welcome. So good afternoon, and welcome to Caribbean launch of Affirming Methodologies, Research and Education. It's really a publication of papers by academics, including a number of universities, okay, and it includes UTT and UE, okay. We are especially proud to have our own Dr. Margaret Naki Chachur from the Center for Education Programs as the editor, okay, of these esteemed publications. The models of research introduced into this book are, I'm told, I've not seen them, but then there are a pronounced deviation from the Eurocentric ones that we've been used to. I mean, I've been brought on that diet, okay, but I'm still around, okay. So I'm personally honored and decided that, and delighted that I'm a witness to this, okay. The University of Trinidad and Tobago continues to champion research and development and act and works which benefit our faculty, okay, and also our students and the country as a whole, and this really is our target, okay. And I'm now about to enumerate one or two of the highlights of achievements of our own staff here, okay. UTT is proud to highlight some of its achievements. The steel pan, okay, which I'm gathering is a national invention since 1930s. I think it's the most recent musical instrument that has been invented on the planet, okay. It's benefited from design input from the mechanical engineering department, okay. I think they've done some work on this, and we are really very proud about this, okay. We are also very proud about the UTT Academy for Performing Arts, which has not only played this instrument and demonstrated it, but has raised it to great heights. Okay. Another UTT academic that I want to talk about, whose work I want to refer to on this great occasion, is Miguel Jaguisar. Okay. Now this fellow is actually here in utilities in this compound, okay, and he has invented this therapeutic contour for which he is on the verge of getting a US patent, okay. So when it happens, a lot of money to a UTT person, which is good for us and good for him as well, okay, all right. Then there is Amalia Hussein. Amalia is very interesting, very important person to refer to here. She was the first biomedical engineering PhD graduate, and I believe she was one of the students of Professor Stout here. Am I right, Professor Stout? Yes. So Professor Stout, well done. she's gone on to do great things, okay. She's invented a personalized cardio. She's invented a way of actually documenting cardiovascular disease risks in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago, okay? And this, I gather, is going to be very important for health delivery to the different ethnicities in this country. So, thank you very much, Professor Valerie Stout, for supervising her doing it so well, okay? The last person, but not the least, is of course Varma Rambaran. Okay, he's an associate professor in UTT. He again is been awarded a patent in the U.S. for some work he has done on developing metallopharmaceuticals for dealing with diabetes. Okay, diabetes, you know, is quite a challenge here in our population. So that's really great. Okay, university commends the exceptional work, and I am really very pleased to be part of this as head of research in the university. This book being launched today gives great direction on research and also contributes to the entrepreneurial development of society through the application of research. Okay. UTT is an entrepreneurial university. We strive hard to move in that direction. Okay. This feeds directly into the university's vision to nurture entrepreneurship, support the development of the country, and create a win-win situation for our academics and for society as a whole. So on the behalf of UTT University's academic community and all those who stand to benefit from this book, okay, I will make sure I get one for myself. I say congratulations to you, to Professor Stout, and all those who have made a contribution to the book. So thank you very much. I won't take any more time. Thank you. Right.
Dr. W. Mark Jackman currently serves as the program head for the Center for Education Programs here at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. He's an associate professor with research interests and publications in adolescent, developmental, and educational psychology. His current work looks at integrating technology in education, gender differences in achievement, and motivation and emotion in education. It is my pleasure to invite our program head, Dr. Jackman, to bring greetings on behalf of our Center for Education Programs.
Thank you, Dr. Ramkissoon. We also like to acknowledge those who have joined us on the live stream, those who are online. We have not forgotten you. We'd like to acknowledge you. This afternoon, I would like to acknowledge the editors of this special publication, Professor Camille Naki, Professor Dr. Margaret Chatur, and Dr. Santana and Wilson Scott. Affirming Methodologies, Research and Education in the Caribbean. There is always a challenge with research in the Caribbean, and I think this publication would go a long way towards alleviating some of the issues or challenges that we face with educational research. There seems to be a sort of there are always walls that are put up when we attempt to do research. There are always, challenges with research. Where I met Professor Naki some years ago in New Zealand as I studied at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. And it is interesting that I'm here at this launch. She's now Professor Naki. And one of the things that I would remember from meeting her in New Zealand is that we had a big line. And that is essential. One of the perspectives that research should be gathered closest to the source in its most genuine and purest form. We had a big line with Clive Lloyd and Brian Lara and Dwayne Bravo and Chanda Paul, etc., at Camille's house. And there's so much was gained out of that line, meeting these individuals in that sort of a setting. I also remember that Professor Joseph and I did a very large research that was funded by the European community that looked at male re-entry into the post-education sector. And for that particular research, one of the things that we had to do, we had to engage with guys on the block, so to speak. So what Professor Joseph and I did, we made a contact with an individual, and he set up a meeting for us to meet these guys on a Sunday evening, and we sat around outside of a garage on stools, on chairs, some sat on the pavement, etc. And we engaged and we took notes and we took information, etc. And that research, that was part of a quote-unquote focus group, but it was very close to what is normal, because it would have been very challenging to have these guys come into some special office or some special room. They were in their natural setting, they spoke from their heart, and the information was really quality, and we were able to use it, and there was a 200 to 300 page document that came out of, and that was just part of the information. So I think this whole notion of gathering data or using methodology that is most germane and that is most pure, quote unquote, as we engage with research in the Caribbean, I think that this particular text would go a long way towards bringing that affirmation, not from the outside, as we always seek external validation from Eurocentric methods and Eurocentric approaches, but we have our own thing, so to speak, and that we can be proud of. We can validate it with all whatever the factors are, whatever criteria is established for quality research. We can have our own genuine quality of research. As the World Cup is on now, everybody knows that Brazil, although they're home, they have their own identifiable brand of football. Spain, Germany, etc., and of course Morocco. They call them the Cinderella of the World Cup, but they have their own special type of football. And I think this text comes at a really, really good time, that we have our own best quality approaches that can stand the test, that will stand the test of time, and that can stand up to any other research method that is already established. So I, on behalf of the Center for Education Programs, because we are not just only into producing teachers, we are also about the big ideas, we are also about research. And if I would remember, some years ago, Dr. Chatru and Professor Naki established the conference, and that conference was based on the same idea that we can create research, we can create quality data from methodologies that are very close to the source. So these methodologies would place a foundation, and through language, the intersection of language and culture would also provide a certain aesthetic that has the Caribbean DNA established in it. So I'm eagerly looking forward to getting into the book and also using some of the methodologies. I presented a paper at that conference, and one of the things that I did in order to be authentic, I had the students respond to me, the research method, we had discussions and had them respond to me on WhatsApp. And then I downloaded all the messages and started to place in, sort the data and analyze the data and so on. But we use a very authentic method. So I want to congratulate the team, and I eagerly look forward to using as well as validating these methodologies as have been outlined. Congratulations again on behalf of the Center for Education Programs.
Thank you very much, Professor Festus Yobo and Dr. Mark Jackman, for bringing these opening remarks and greetings. I'd like to take the time to acknowledge Professor Clement Ember, Chairman of the Board of Governors, University of Trinidad and Tobago. So we're going now to hear about this publication. We're going to hear about researching to writing to publishing from none other than Professor Camille Naki, one of the editors of the collection. Professor Naki is a professor in the School of Social Sciences and Public Policy at the Auckland University of Technology. Her research focuses on centering, affirming, and culturally relevant research methodologies. She has received the Order of Merit from the Government of New Zealand for services to ethnic communities in education. Professor Naki has done extensive research into Maori and Pacifica educational achievement, family and community among Pacifica youth, factors impacting on migrant resettlement, and culturally relevant research methodologies. She was the inaugural chairperson of the Auckland Council's Ethnic Peoples Advisory Panel. She has held several voluntary roles in community and public sector boards. She chairs AUT's Pacific Media Center Advisory Board and the Migrant Action Trust. She's the founder and manager of the Caribbean's Southern Stars Steel Band and a member of the Executive Advisory Board of the African Communities Forum. I met Professor Naki on the Caribbean Research Methodologies Forum, an online network. So it is my real pleasure to invite Professor Naki to tell us about researching to writing to publishing.
Okay. Kira koutou katoa. Warm Caribbean greetings to you all, and I bring warm Pacific greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So no mai haere mai. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming. I would have to say that introduction was from Margaret. I gave her one line only, and I do not know how it extended for so long. So again, thank you for being here. I just want to speak to the fact that we got here today on the backs and the shoulders of some amazing leaders and collaborators and supporters and researchers, teachers, colleagues, friends. Even our detractors and antagonists were helpful in getting us here today, and we appreciate all of that. We have valued the debates, the contributions, and the discussions. And we continue, and we will continue, a journey that began with our ancestors from Africa, India, Europe, and absolutely from our own Caribbean lands here. There's a Maori, Whakatoki Maori proverb that says, Waiho ite toi potu, kawa I te toirua. And it means, let us keep close together, not far apart. So in talking about this journey here and how we've come from all over, I'd like to acknowledge my speechwriter Panos over there from Greece. And for all those that have come from away, and for all those listening from afar. When we started this, as Dr. Mark Jackman pointed out, and I just want to acknowledge the wonderful words of Professor Festus Yobo. Thank you very, very much for that kind acknowledgement, Dr. Festus. When I lived in Aotearoa, New Zealand, for those of you that don't know, the Maori name for New Zealand is Aotearoa, and it's a word in common use now, and so that is what I will refer to out of respect to the indigenous people, the Tangata Whenua, Māori of Aotearoa. So living in there, they have their own research methodologies called Papa Māori methodologies that they use that gives respect and acknowledgement to Tikanga Māori customs and traditions. And within Aotearoa, we have our Pacific communities, and they have their own ways of knowing and researching. Things, ways such as Talanoa, using Tivaivai, Kakala. So they have used their own ways of knowing and understanding. And living there and researching there, my family is from the Pacific. My husband and kids are Samoan. The best part of them, of course, is the Trinidad part. But living over there, you realize that people have used their own ways of knowing to be able to gain more authentic solutions to any problems that they might have, or to understand their own world. And we know that looking at the traditional ways, whether we have experiments, focus groups, interviews, have not been something that is innately part of us. We know that is not how we communicate. And you just have to go down to the local rum shop to know that that's not how we communicate here in Trinidad and Tobago. And working at the university and having a number of PhD students, and some from the countries in Africa, our African students are also exploring and are using their own ways. And I remember about maybe 10 years ago, I had a student from Nigeria who was looking at how Nigerian women resettle in Aotearoa. And she wanted to use African oral traditions of storytelling to do her research. And there was some hesitation, there was some, I would say, pushback, because the university was unaccustomed to it. I was her second supervisor, and the one she came to, I was not born in Africa, but I understood what she was coming from, because she knew that the students and she knew that the women she wanted to speak with would not give her what she was looking for using Eurocentric methods. And so she stood steadfastly to using African oral traditions of storytelling. I stood alongside her with that, and I learned so much about how our African people engage. Now, this is not to say that African oral tradition of storytelling is for all African nations, but what it did at that university and throughout Aotearoa, because she was the first person to use that, it set a trend for other students since then to use their own culturally relevant approaches to sharing knowledge. And since then, recently, I've just had a student who's graduated with using Ubuntu methodology and using Shishaniyama. I'm not sure if you know what it is, but it's a way of how you gather around cooking meats in South Africa. And for those of you familiar with the Ubuntu methodology, that says I am because you are. And now they are exploring their own ways specific to the different nations in Africa. And from my perspective, I thought, well, in Trinidad, actually, why aren't we using our own authentic, natural ways of communicating to understand each other? So in developing Caribbean research methodologies, when we first thought about it, and I just want to say this did not start with me. Lyman and Old Talk, as you know, predated you, predated your parents, predated your grandparents. I am just carrying on something that they have begun. And it's not just me, it is all of you, and it is so many of you have made contributions to this in one way or another. And so we carried out Limes and Old Talks in Aotearoa, in Tamaki Makoro, which is Auckland, in Toronto, Brooklyn, New Jersey, Arima here. We had a Lime down in Arima, thanks to Jordy who set that up. They had a cookout too in Port of Spain, Montego Bay in Jamaica. So, and it was interesting, the difference between how Jamaicans, how they saw limes and how we operated here. But it was the same way of engaging authentically. But the thing about Liming and Old Talk, or any culturally relevant research methodology, any methodology that affirms who we are, that grounds us, that centers us without us always having to say we are doing this and we are not doing this because. We do not need to always be in contestation with a European epistemology. We need to be sure of ourselves so that we say we are doing this because it is best for us. And I think we moved, I don't want to say we moved away from the decolonizing approach, but I'm saying we needed to move forward because the decolonizing approach kept us grounded always in a struggle, in a contesting, in a debate about, well, we are not using a colonial or Eurocentric method because this is better. We don't always need to be arguing. We don't always need to be drawing a Eurocentric approach into the discussion. We need to center ourselves. We need to realize our value in and of ourselves without always having to say, well, we are better than. We know our situation. We know where we are located, and we need to stand firm with that. And so, and having culturally relevant affirming methodologies, it is as much qualitative as it is quantitative, because it is not so much, for us, the old talk is the research method. The liming is the methodology, but it is having affirming methodologies, whether we use it in a quantitative space and a qualitative space. And I'm saying that particularly for Valerie, Professor Stout, because who is so firmly wedded to quantitative. And I should remind her that actually my first degree is in biochemistry, so I am on the natural sciences too, and I did teach statistics for a long time. So, but it is, she's going to come argue. You want to come at me here, Valerie? No, and but it is not to say we didn't get pushback from, we did, from ethics communities in doing Lyman and Old Talk, because we included alcohol. We said, and of course, if you know ethics committees, we're not supposed to include things like that. We didn't put a time limit on how long a lime takes, because as you all know here, a lime is not going to take an hour and a half for that, so it went on as long as we wanted. We let people come in and out. We argued against having written forms, consent forms. We agreed to have give oral consent. We made sure that everyone was safe, for the limers and all of us. And we ourselves were the limers. We did not have a hierarchy of us being researchers and people who were being researched. And the pushback wasn't only from ethics committees, but we also had our, I suppose, non-believers, or even some of the limers said why we wanted to make this Lyman, put it in an academic space. Well, academia does not always need to be serious. We can have fun in academia. If you're not having fun in academia, maybe academia needs to change a bit. So, but our peers and academic researchers did struggle with it, but as you get to know, but we know that has a lot to do with our colonial legacy. We know also that we need to stand strongly and firmly with what we believe in, because if we do not define things for ourselves, people will define us to our detriment and to their benefit. So we need to find that confirmation and that affirmation of ourselves. And in trying to get to that space, I read a quote that says, there are two types of people who will tell you that you cannot make a difference in the world. Those who are afraid to try, and those who are afraid you will succeed. And this is what has kept us going. But even though we did get pushback, what we got was amazing support and interest from everywhere, from students, colleagues, researchers, PhD students. When we did Liming and Old Talk, there was so much interest in it that other students in other spaces are also inquiring as to what is culturally relevant in their own spaces. So this is not to say everyone should do Lyman and Old Talk, but you need to do what's culturally relevant, what's affirming for your own space. What is your affirming approach to sharing knowledge? So we had a conference in 2018, as Dr. Mark referred to there, and he presented, and we had such amazing presentations. People came from Aotearoa for that, and I wouldn't want to say they were surprised at how intelligent we are here in the Caribbean, but it affirmed what they knew of the intelligence in the Caribbean. And from there we had a number of onlines, which we've named online discussions, we've named it online. So yes, I think we're colonizing some of the vocabulary too. So we had a number of onlines in 2019, 2020, 2021, and we recently had one in 2022. But after 2019, following on from the conference, we decided to put a book together because there was a lot of interest, and we had an amazing collection of authors and voices. And so we gift this book to you, to all of you that have contributed to it. Ahakoa he iti, he ponamu. It's a Maori Whakatoki that says it is small, but it is a treasure. And so we give that to all of us, for all of those that went before us, that can't be here today. We hope we have acknowledged you in this. And it has led to interest in a second book, and we look forward to putting that second book. I know we have some amazing people here that we are going to call on to help us with that book. So before I go, I want to say thanks to the Caribbean Research Methodologies core team. Everybody knows Margaret Naki. We have Annabelle Fernandez Santana from Cuba, who cannot be here with us. She lives in Aotearoa. Shakisha Wilson Scott in Jamaica. And people who have been there with us from the start. Valerie Stout, Joanne DeFubab and her team. We've had Yentil Williams and her team, Heather DeVere, and Kelly and Michael and their team. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all those people who have been with us from the start, who've journeyed with us, who have challenged us, who have questioned us. And now we're all in this here, moving forward together. So thank you. Tinakoto, 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 kato.
We thank Professor Camille Nakid for that exposition of the journey from research to writing to publishing. And the words that she leaves with us are, if we do not define things for ourselves, others will define it for us. And I would further say, indeed, claim it for themselves. So we thank her for that. Our next speaker is Valerie Stout, professor and renowned academic scholar and researcher who has spent most of her life involved in formal training and or practice in multiple disciplines. She graduated from the University of the West Indies with a double first-class honors in chemistry and math, earning her a UE Open Scholarship, and later on the University of Toronto Open Scholarship and the PEO International Scholarship. Her accomplishments here also earned her the Royal Exhibition of 1851 Scholarship, this under the patronage of the British royal family. And she used that scholarship to pursue postdoctoral research under Sir Victor Gould at King's College, London. After her mother died in 2007, Professor Stout returned to Trinidad and Tobago in 2008 to take up a post at this university, teaching in 5 postgraduate programs and in postgraduate studies and research. Even after her tenure ended, she continued to actively oversee 4 of her doctoral students to completion. At present, she guides postgraduate students and is a consultant across many areas of research. From its inception, Professor Stout was interested in our discussion of methodologies that were new to Caribbean research, and she has been a fierce advocate and at times a serious debater for affirming methodologies and liming methodology in particular at all of our online seminars. She is the consummate erudite scholar. Professor Stout has written the foreword for our edited collection and will now speak to this. Let us welcome Professor Valerie Stout.
Good afternoon, all protocols observed. I want to, before I time myself, I'm going to set my clock. I want to correct two things. The first is about Amalia Hussain and mention Natasha Ramrup Singh, who was indeed the major supervisor. I was the co-supervisor, the technical part. We have lost Natasha Ramrup Singh to a Canadian university, but we continue to be in contact, and we have just submitted for publication the very one of the papers from the study that Festus mentioned. I also want to correct Camille. I am not wedded to quantitative. I'm a research methodologist. As a research methodologist, my interest is Catholic. You know, so at any rate, this is a pure pleasure for me. And it is a pleasure because I've seen the quality of these people, of the developers. They dotted all the I's, they crossed all the T's, and you know, in thinking about my remarks today, this launch is not about making money. Of course, they want to sell books, but not to make money. This launch, and you will understand why I say what I'm about to say, is to bring Caribbean researchers some comfort and some relief. And I will show you why those two are applicable. I'm going to divert just a little bit, I'm timing myself, to give some background information, because what I think would be most important for me to do is to talk about who can use this book, what it is all about, and how to use it from my point of view. All my remarks are my own. They have nothing to do with Margaret or Camille or Shakisha or Anna. So, starting with what is research? People labor the misapprehension that research is all about academia, universities. Not at all. Research is evidence-based gathering of what you need to find a solution. So it produces evidence-based decision-making and evidence-based inferences and conclusions. So it means that a manager in a government office could have a problem and could do research to get an answer. And as a matter of fact, it's more fun, Camille was talking about fun, when you're outside doing applied research, because you don't have to go through all the hoops of passing exams and having an oral defense and things like that. So many people can use research. Now, what is research? As I said, it's the evidence-based gathering, but also I want to talk about who should be doing research, and I just said that, but what sort of research should we be doing in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean? The reality is there are three things that belong to us. One is our environment, one is our society, and another is our culture. Of course, there's our economy, but the first three sort of fuel that. And very, very important research in Trinidad and Tobago is societal research. Societal studies. This is not social science, nor is it sociology. This is studying the applied problems that rend the social fabric. So it's not about classroom, formal stuff. It is about looking outside and seeing what is a problem, how can I solve it? And this is why I am so grateful to the editors and the developers of Affirming Methodologies for bringing this book to us. So what they try to do, or have succeeded in doing, but before I talk about that, I want to talk a little bit about the barriers to research. Camille touched on it. The major barrier to research is fear. Fear of the unknown. And when you are a researcher or a manager or somebody who needs information and you really don't know how to get it, you can be too afraid to try. You know, now again, I'm not suggesting that the people who are afraid are cowards. Sometimes it's the more sensible people who have fear and the fools rush in. But fear can paralyze you. And you have to be willing to say, now, of course, laziness is also a barrier, but I'm not dealing with that. I'm dealing with the people who genuinely want an answer. So I want to talk about the pillars of research just for a minute. There are two pillars to research. One is data and information collecting, and the other one is analysis. You have that, you have everything. Now, what this book offers is an important support for the first, for information collecting. Again, what you need could come from inanimate objects. A lot of the environment is about making measurements that have nothing to do with people. But once you are going to deal with people and get information from people, I keep telling Camille and it's much, much harder than dealing with the inanimate. Qualitative research is much, much, much harder than getting physical data and doing quantitative research. That is much easier. There's also quantitative approaches to getting information. I am not necessarily wedded to those either, but those are also easier than the qualitative aspect of getting information. So hopefully in the future we would get something about analysis. But the beauty of this book is that these developers want these methods to be used. They want to send it out there and they want people to use them. The more the methods are used, the stronger they become. Now, they have done a lot of work. They produced 2 doctorates, as far as I know. Camille could correct me. One is Anna, one of the editors, who looked at 53 limes in New Zealand. Sorry, 53 people, and did 8 limes with them in New Zealand, expats, talking about, you know, what they needed. She had to pass the ethics review. She had to pass, again, the skeptics. So they laid the groundwork, and they are available. If you decide to do that, they are available as a resource. I'm fairly confident in saying that. Give their names, their email addresses, you can write them, and this helps to develop the method. Now, I know for a fact that people, our international people, this is not just for the Caribbean. This is something I would also like to emphasize to Camille and Margaret, etc. They bring comfort to the Caribbean, yes, but I know for a fact that people elsewhere who study indigenous peoples, and of course Camille knows that because she researches in New Zealand, but I have spoken to Canadian researchers who study indigenous people, and they were very, very, very interested. Because again, you can't simply take the Eurocentric techniques. Now, I just wanted to make one thing clear, and it was something I realized at our last on Lyme. When I was first introduced to Lyme on Old Talk, which I love, I envisaged the parallel version of a focus group, where it could only be, you know, a group and you'd have that interaction. But at that same online session, a young lady who had just got a PhD from a US university now, and who looked at certain cultural things in Jamaica. So she had to speak in Creole. She had to get permission to collect this information in Creole. So she had a tough ethics thing, but she crossed it. So everybody who crosses that barrier makes the research stronger. But her limes were one-on-one. So that is intriguing, and I had not thought about that. And just yesterday, I was talking to a student at UWE Jamaica who is looking at marine parks in Jamaica and the governance of marine parks, and she needs to talk to fishermen. And I told her about Lyman and Old Talk. I always talk about Lyman and Old Talk, incidentally. And I told her Shakisha would be in Jamaica because she, in talking to the fishermen, we were trying to develop a survey. She had wanted to do a focus group, but I said, let me see how this pans out. And it turned out to be more applicable to a survey. But there were things she did not know. And I said, well, go have a casual talk with the fishermen. Still make sure you understand that it is research and you could write it up along with this survey. Buy a red stripe, go in a bar, buy a red stripe and sit down and talk to them one and then go and talk to another. For her, it would be better to do what this young lady in the US did. One-on-one lines with the fishermen. Just before I left UTT, there was a project where we wanted to look at the development of River Swamp, which is the largest water spot, and we wanted to look at ecotourism for River Swamp, as many things, and that is a place with a lot of farmers, rice farmers, and they have their issues, and I have to move very fast now. And one of the things that we wanted to do was the same Lyman and Old Talk. Have a series of little limes in the areas. But let me quickly tell you how the book is broken down. So very quickly, the introduction, and it's why I said comfort and relief is because Camille, Professor Naki, spends the introduction comforting. It's as if she's gentling skittish researchers. She's telling them, here it is. This is for you. This is where you can be comfortable. This is where you have synergies. Okay, I didn't realize that until yesterday when I reread her introduction. I said, but you know, I got the feeling she was mentally doing this. And what she also emphasized in her introduction was how to position yourself as a researcher in that space. So that's why I said comfort and relief. Relief because Caribbean researchers can say, yes, this is something I can do. Comfort because they understand it. They're not afraid of it. It doesn't seem as foreign. But I don't want anybody to think that in developing this, there was a lack, that it was Vai-ki-Vai. There's nothing Vai-ki-Vai about that. Just that there's nothing Vai-ki-Vai about a lime. If you're planning a lime, you have to study the food, the drink, where it will be, what cars, who will park. There's nothing Vai-ki-Vai about a lime, and there's nothing Vai-ki-Vai about this book. You see, people tend to think that Caribbean people are easygoing, blah, 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 no structure. I think Camille is conflating my love for structure with saying I'm only quantitative, not at all. But at any rate, so you have the introduction, and if I were a young, even as an old researcher, you read the introduction slowly, and then you get chapters where Anna's chapter, for instance, on Lyman and Old Talk, where they describe in detail what they do, so you have a how-to, like a recipe. And there are other chapters further on where people describe different things, like after Anna there comes Mashup, which is a Jamaican approach, and they looked at that with two communities in Canada. One was a care facility for people from the Caribbean, and the other was the LGBTQ, I'd love to read that, the LGBTQ performance space. Okay, drag performance space. And so we have Anna, who dealt with people, that she could use that anywhere. We could use that anywhere in the world. And the same thing, and also anywhere in a society. Then we have Mashup, which puts the focus then on communities. And then as we go further in, there's groundings, which put the focus on, they used the Rastafari principles to look at this thrust in Jamaica where they are trying to do reclaim some of what we lost in the Caribbean. So they applied it to an activity. So I hope you see the versatility. You could do it with individuals, you could do it with communities, you could do it with activities. So the last two are case studies, the community and the activity. Okay, the others are not. And then I want to end with, in between there are several interesting chapters, but I want to end with a chapter by Margaret, Dr. Margaret Naki on rituals. Margaret is a psychologist. She's also one of the sweetest, gentlest people I know, thereby making her capable of understanding the psyche of people. And her claim is that rituals play an important role. Now, when a psychologist who understands psyche, who's also kind and sweet, tells you this helps, you listen. Okay? So, in wondering where to research, we have the book also guides you in all the different areas of research. So for people who are looking for a project, okay, which would be the university students, you get guidance on that. You see where other people have researched, where the people in the book have researched. And this whole thing about rituals, it makes me sad because Gregor Breedy, who studied limbo, and who died and was given a posthumous doctorate by UTT, rightly so, because he had submitted his PhD. Limbo is a funereal, started as a funereal ritual. And I know Gregor would have loved this book, loved the whole idea of investigating rituals. And I know that some younger researchers here, Marcus, Atto, just to name a few, I know that in their own fields, which are disparate, Atto is sports, Marcus is agricultural studies, not just soil science, that they too are interested. So it's not for a particular discipline. The book is not for a particular discipline. It's not just for universities. It has very, very broad reach. And the more people use it, the stronger it will be. But I'm sorry I took more time, I heard my thing, but I feel very strongly about this and how useful it could be. Definitely useful. So you read the introduction slowly, you let Camille gentle you, and then you start to look at all of the methods and start to feel comfortable with them. And if you don't understand something, you contact the developers. But at any rate, I'm very proud of them for this. So congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Stout, for your very thorough, in-depth look at the text. So you know all of you have to buy it now. Thank you again. Before we go to now we come to a very exciting part of the book event where we're going to look at what people have done. And if we could invite our IT people here. So two of our readers hail, one from Barbados, the other from New Zealand. And we'll have a little look at what they're doing. So our first reader is Dr. Jean Butcher-Lashley, who will speak on Chapter 1, Researcher Positionality in the Caribbean Research Space. She is the head Quality Assurance and Enhancement Unit at the Barbados Community College. Her doctorate is in educational studies. Her recent book, published in August 2022, entitled The Life Histories of Principles of Higher Education in Barbados, has made a unique contribution to the literature around the teachers' lives and careers in general, and those in the Caribbean diaspora. We go on to our second reader, Professor Kelly Temaiharoa, who will speak to Chapter 9. Their chapter is on Affirming Methodologies in Peace and Conflict Studies, co-authored with Heather DeVere and Michael Liga. Professor Kelly is of Waitaha, Taranaki, and Ngati Maniapoto descent. At Otago Polytechnic, she works in the College of Work-Based Learning, is a member of the Te Pukenga Grangahau Maori Forum, and is also the Co-Secretary General for Asia Pacific Peace Research Association. Professor Kelly's research interests are indigenous peace traditions, decolonizing methodologies, kapaupa, Maori education, and peace and social justice. So we'll have our two first readers from Barbados and from the Pacific.
Wrote the first chapter entitled Researcher Positioning in the Caribbean Research Space. I will begin by reading sections that define positioning and indicate its significance, and will conclude with a section entitled The Creation of Voice, which is an aspect of positionality related to the difficult but rewarding journey of exposing the identity, values, and beliefs of the Caribbean researcher. The use of the word positioning takes into consideration the identity of the researcher as critical in the research process, and also in exposing aspects of the researcher's biography, beliefs, and values, which include the nature of knowledge and agency, positionality. It also considers both the misguided claim to ownership by colonizers and their descendants, coloniality of position, but also more significantly, it is about the legitimate claiming or centering of knowledge or ways of knowing by indigenous and local Caribbean peoples within a Carib-centric paradigm. There is no doubt that positionality as a recovery project invites a new kind of dialogue and necessitates thoughtful engagement or praxis and unlearning of Western research and theories, and a weaving together of forgotten histories and policies that could provide a rich fabric for meaningful social change in the Caribbean. It can be done. I share with you now how Margaret and I discovered our own voices in the difficult but rewarding journey to self-discovery within academia. I start with my voice and read from page 22. I am an Afro-Caribbean researcher with a voice and a passion for life history methodology. I use the phrase "with a voice" because for most of my life I did not realize that I had a voice that I could use in academia. I kept diaries and notebooks for journaling, which I have done intermittently for most of my life. However, my doctoral journey was unique in that it commenced with me learning to write or speak using my own voice in an academic context. This was a liberating experience after being schooled in Barbados to use the royal we or write objectively, where your voice or personal opinion must always appear hidden. It was considered in poor style to do otherwise. On learning that I could speak in my own voice with the use of I, and at that educational level, I suddenly breathed differently. It was a deep breath that filled my lungs, sitting in that annex, container-converted room at the British Academy in Trinidad, as the July rain pounded outside. Above the noise of the rain, we were told to write our story about how we came to be where we were as doctoral candidates. That request or instruction from the program director started a journey to self-discovery that has resulted in a strength and determination that I knew I had, but was now being harnessed in a new way. What was most meaningful was that I did not know that I had a story to tell. My story became interwoven in the pages of my doctoral thesis in such a way that it allowed me to keep in touch with who I was in relation to my research, and in so doing, I was engaged in a process where I continued to grow. Now, this is Margaret's voice from page 23. 3 blind mice. See how they run. In the Caribbean, if your voice or ways of thinking did not match the voice of those who were in authority, they, teachers and educators, insisted that you had the wrong voice and tried to convert you to their way of thinking. I remember that I was mute in my early years, keenly aware that many situations did not have the happy endings as the classics would portray, such as Bronte's Jane Eyre and Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. And why would my mother always say that girls should be seen and not heard? Cuba's revolutionary years opened up a window to a critical analysis of my positioning in the Caribbean space. In some ways, which I did not yet understand at 15 years old, I had identified with Guevara and Castro and their liberation philosophy that spoke to me in myriad ways. Later at university, I read the works of the psychologist Frantz Fanon, who wrote Black Skin's White Mask, and that was my aha moment. What were Caribbean educators blindly teaching us all along that sought to morph our identity and Caribbeanness into the accepted mask of a white man, black man? I no longer feared to speak out on issues that sought to subjugate our cultural uniqueness. In conclusion, Affirming Methodologies is about unmasking and exposing who we are and who we be in the Caribbean research space and without apology. This includes our need to speak with our own voices and encourage others to do so in our research and writing from our own cultural spaces or contexts, our ways of knowing and being. Thank you for listening and do enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
The editors, contributors and families of Affirming Methodologies, Research and Education in the Caribbean. Sorry I can't be there at the moment to celebrate the launch of this book, but I just wanted to share with you our best wishes from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and share with you some of our thoughts on our chapter. So our chapter brings together the work of a number of Indigenous scholars whose PhD thesis engaged with issues of peace and conflict at the University of Otago, Dunedin, Aotearoa, New Zealand. We presented their work as it contributes to the concept of affirming methodologies. These students are from Aotearoa, Afghanistan, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Palestine and Samoa. Many of these students refer to the work of the renowned Māori scholar Linda Tuhiwai-Smith in her seminal book on decolonising methodologies. So the students proposed using kaupapa Māori processes of indigenising and decolonising our methodologies here in Aotearoa. Pacifica students use Talanoa and Whale Tue as a form of dialogue. Ethnography and storytelling have been used by students from Africa and the Middle East. The importance of identity is highlighted in the world views that are expressed in Māori whakapapa, Palestinian border identity, identity shaped by one's culture, language, religion and politics. Ways of knowing are learned through family storytelling, resistance to oppression, cultural diversity, engaging in everyday practices to affirm Indigenous knowledge and ways of being. This chapter makes a contribution to the book by demonstrating how affirming methodologies can be applied in many different contexts in a way that provides an alternative refocus that recenters on the positive rather than the terminology of decolonisation that maintains within it the concept that has negativised Indigenous people. And in closing, lastly, I'll be visiting your beautiful country in May 2023 and hope to catch up with some of you then. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
So thank you to Dr. Jean Butcher-Lashley from Barbados and our co-authored chapter 1, and Professor Kelly T. Maiharoa. Our third reader is Dr. Nisha Selvon Ramkissoon, who will speak on her co-authored chapter 5, Affirming an Endonormative Approach in Language Research Design in the Caribbean. Dr. Nisha is a literary scholar, currently based at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and is the head of language and linguistics. In 2021, she organized a conference that addressed stylistics, critical discourse analysis, and language use in the Caribbean. Moving away from foreign exonormative approaches to linguistic appraisals is key to her research interests, and this resonates in the entire chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Nisha Selvon Ramkissoon.
Okay, it's still me. I know you just saw me as MC. I'm a reader now. So when Margaret invited me during the COVID lockdown to an online, that's what they call their meetings, I told her that I too had a Ling Lime. My colleagues who were in different parts of the world, and all of us on lockdown, we used to meet online to talk about linguistics and to lime. So she further told me that they engage in liming methodologies, and I said, well, we can work together then. So my colleagues, Christian Ali, Ben Braithwaite, Rand Singh, Samantha Jackson, and I did this chapter for the collection, Affirming an Endonormative Approach in Language Research Design in the Caribbean. Endonormative meaning from within. So Christian and Ben are sign linguists. Rand Singh works in World Englishes. Samantha Jackson works in language acquisition, and my research interest, as Margaret told you, is in critical discourse analysis and second language learning. So I'm going to read a part from Ben and Christian's section, because Ben wanted to be here to do this reading himself. And one of the things that all five of us have had to reckon with in doing linguistic research in the Caribbean is positionality. Where do we place ourselves in relation to the people we are trying to find out about, the people we're trying to represent authentically? And I think this is a good section to read for you, because this section, Initial Research on Sign Language in Trinidad and Tobago, tells of what happened when Ben and Christian did research initially according to how we were trained. Professor Yobo was trained the same way, to create distance between the researcher and what is being researched. So he highlights some of the difficulties that they encountered after doing research this particular way. Ben's involvement in sign language research began around 2008. The University of the West Indies had recently approved a new diploma program in Caribbean Sign Language interpreting. There was no doubt that there was an urgent need for more trained and certified sign language interpreters across the region, and the diploma program had been designed to address this. At the time, there had been very little research on Caribbean sign languages. Notable exceptions included the work in the 1970s and 80s on Providence Island Sign Language. Most pressingly, there was very little published research on sign language in Trinidad and Tobago, where the program was to be offered. The initial imperative for research was therefore to collect sufficient information to inform the delivery of the UE diploma program, which included 3 courses on the structure and usage of Caribbean sign languages, as well as an interpreting practicum. Ben was concerned that the program be based on local practices and norms, not as has often happened in the Caribbean and elsewhere, on imported materials from the US. A review of the limited literature which existed at this time revealed some surprising and, it turned out, incorrect claims about sign languages in the region. One article, written by a former principal of the Tobago School for the Deaf, Speech, and Language Impaired, suggested that sign languages in Trinidad and Tobago St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Barbados lacked certain signs for local fruits and vegetables, such as spice, clove, nutmeg, breadfruit, chenet, ackee, dashi, and cassava. As Ben began meeting deaf Trinidadians, building relationships, and learning to sign, it became clear that such signs did in fact exist. The fact that the hearing teachers and the deaf students did not know these signs at the school said more about the limited ways in which hearing teachers and deaf students engaged with the wider deaf communities. Clearly, to understand the signing situation better, a much broader section of the signing community needed to be represented. Keen to correct this misconception, in 2009, Ben collaborated with a small group of deaf researchers, another hearing linguist, and hearing interpreters, and decided to gather data from a much larger sample of signers from a range of backgrounds and a range of ages. One of the features that they adopted from these international models, just skipping ahead, so I'm letting you know that they used an international model to collect a corpus of signs. One of the features that they adopted from these international models was that all data collection will be carried out by deaf researchers, and in general, there will be no hearing people present during the recording sessions. As a result, neither Ben nor the other team members was directly involved in the data collection process. This meant that, although Ben met regularly and collaborated with the deaf researchers on the team, he did not build relationships with many of the deaf people who participated in the projects. This approach to data collection also drew from international models in other ways, employing widely used elicitations prompts such as Mayer's 1969, "Frog, where are you?" The rationale for doing this was that it would allow for straightforward comparisons for the structural patterns in the data they were collecting and similar recordings made internationally. The project was successful in certain respects. Over 80 people were recorded from all geographical parts of Trinidad and Tobago across a full range of ages. The recordings have been used in designing teaching materials and generating student research projects at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. But even before the project had been completed, it became apparent that there were some important methodological shortcomings. The first problem concerned the positionality of the researchers. Ben's hearing had limited signing competence at the time and had only lived in Trinidad for around a year when the research began, which meant he had very limited understanding of the dimensions of the signing community when he began the research. All three deaf researchers were men, around the same age, the mid-20s, from the south of Trinidad and belonged to the same religious group. The specific positionalities of the researchers had a marked effect on the interactions they had with the participants and consequently, the data that were collected for the project. The deliberate attempt to remove the hearing researchers from the data collection process probably did prevent certain styles of signing which tend to accommodate hearing people. But it also meant that the hearing researchers were not building authentic and transparent relationships with all the participants. They had come to think of this as an essential part of the research process, particularly in communities in which the researchers are outsiders. The third problem was that by focusing primarily on narrower concerns of linguistic description in the research design, they missed the opportunity to document important aspects of unique social history of the language and its users. As it turned out, the project made recordings of several members of the very first generation of Trinidad and Tobago Sign Language signers who created the language in the early years of the first deaf school founded in Porto, Spain. The experiences of those early years would have been of great interest to researchers. More importantly, a documentation of that history could have been the foundation of a unique resource for the deaf community itself. All of these people have since passed away. So Ben and Christian highlighted three problems they encountered using what I would call Eurocentric methodologies. And the next section of the chapter, Evolving Methodologies, tells how they adapted to a more affirming Caribbean methodology in order to correct these problems. And if you'd like to know how that went, you can purchase a copy of the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nisha. And we'd like to thank all of our three readers, Dr. Jean Butcher-Lashley, Dr. Kelly T. Mahara, and Dr. Nisha Ramkissoon. Thank you very much. At this point, we are coming to the close of our event. But before we do that, and before we give the vote of thanks, we would like to invite Professor Clement Ember, Chairman of the Board of Governors of this university, to give us a few words. Professor.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon to everybody. A few evenings ago, Margaret called me and told me that the president who was supposed to give the welcoming remarks could no longer attend. He has hurt his back. And would you speak at the function? So I said, okay. And I looked at the stuff that she had sent to me about the book and so on, and I started to prepare something. And I was then told, to my relief, that Professor Yobo would fill in for Professor Prasad. So thank you, Professor, for filling in. I don't have to give the things I started to prepare. Well, I stopped preparing it, of course, because there are lots of things I have to do. And actually, I rushed off prematurely, I must say, from a board meeting, MIC board meeting, to make sure I would be here, because if I didn't come, Margaret would not forgive me. Her husband is my good friend, and her children are, I can also say I know them very well. So they would not forgive me either. So I'm here, having told the board meeting, you're all taking too long, and I have something else to do. I will leave right away because, believe it or not, I had this board meeting at MIC. I have this. I have to drop into UWI to it's their Christmas function today, and I got a special invitation from the principal, the new principal. And believe it or not, I have a function in Port of Spain at 7:30 tonight. So, but I'll get a driver, a beautiful driver, to carry me to Port of Spain later on. She doesn't have a cap and so on, but I think I must get one for her, because she has been driving me about these days to many things, because I recently had cataract surgery and I couldn't drive in the night, and I had one or two things to do. But I must congratulate all of you, Margaret in particular. When Margaret first called me about this, she said, Professor, I really didn't want to call you, you know I don't call you just like that, but we sent a request to the president and he hasn't responded. I said, what is this request? She said, the book launch. I said, no, I will talk to the president, man. Wherever you're going to have your book launch, it will be okay, don't worry. I'll talk to him. He has a lot to do, so he probably forgot. And then she said, well, that's fine, but we wanted you all to buy 100 books. I said, what? I said, no, Margaret, the university is not in the business of buying books. I said, we have had several book launches by Professor Liverpool and Utley and so on, and we bought 10 books from them after some begging from them for the library and so on. She said, oh God, that is such a disappointment. I said, all right. I'll talk to the president and tell him to buy a few more than 10. I believe he did. So we must thank the president for buying more than 10, which is what we normally buy for the libraries. But as I say, I must congratulate all of you. I was present at the conference. In 2018, it was held at Valsayn, and I must congratulate all of you for putting the proceedings in a book. It's very important. As we heard, I don't have to repeat how important culture and other things, the important role that they play in research, and that we can't always depend on the models that we have got, the Eurocentric models as they are called. There's a lot of commonality, of course, in research methodologies, whether it's Eurocentric or US-centric or whatever. But of course, there are peculiarities, and we have to recognize that. And these peculiarities, particularly in what is referred to as the countries in the South, normally, again, there's a almost condescending way of saying the third world. But these particular methodologies and the methods of recounting experiences and so on in these parts of the world have been frowned upon by the so-called first world. But they are just as authentic, and they are actually more authentic in our circumstances, and therefore it's very important. And we heard, of course, a very excellent exposition of this particular theme and this particular philosophy by Professor Naki. And as I say, I must congratulate all of you, Professor Naki, of course, who is here and has come now all the way from New Zealand. I can't remember the term that you use. If you tell it to me about 4 times, I'll probably remember it. But I'll call it New Zealand. Aotearoa? Yeah. Aotearoa. Well, all right. Let me give it the... Let me stick with the Eurocentric name for now. And when you teach me better, I will know. And Dr. Margaret Naked Chatur, of course, Dr. Selvan Ramkissoon, and Professor Stout, and the others who are not here, who are co-editors of this book. And I'm glad to hear that there's a second one, a sort of sequel coming out, because we need to, as I say, embed in the minds of our researchers that we have to do things our own way, and not that we are discarding the other ways, but we have to complement, supplement, replace those ways with our ways. So thank you very much, and of course Professor Stout, who was there at the conference also, and as she says, she's not just a quantitative person, because she did teach research methodologies to several classes in UDT before she left. So again, thank you to Professor Jackman. I came in at the sort of, I think, pretty early in his discourse, because he spoke for quite some time, and I heard most of it, so I think I was pretty early in his discourse. And Professor Yobo, I didn't hear yours, but I'm sure it was good. So again, thank you, and thank for all of you. Now, if I can rush off, please, to go and, if I can rush off and go and spend a little hour with my UE. I'm still at UE, right? I'm a professor emeritus. I have an office there. It's the only office I have, actually. Everybody knows I don't want any office in UTT. I don't want any office in MIC, because they can be used by other people. So to spend a little time there, especially as I got a special invitation from the principal. Yeah? So I'll rush off now. So thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation.
We thank Professor Clement Ember for his few words and for his jovial character, as usual. I want to, before we go to the vote of thanks, and I want to have you, after the event, we have refreshments, very nice refreshments prepared for you right next door in the lounge. I want to let you know that books are on sale. Yeah. And we have Camille Gajada Chatur, my beautiful daughter-in-law, who will be selling those books. So we have hard copies and the soft copies. The soft copies are $300 and the hard copy is $900. 900. So if you would like to get a copy, and let me tell you, it's really worth it. It's really worth it. And we have sold this so far in Martinique, in the region, in St. Lucia, and all of those areas. And we now come to the vote of thanks, and I now invite my co-host, Dr. Selvan Ramkissoon.
Right, here I am as Master of Ceremonies again. So thank you very much to, first of all, our UTT officials, Professor Yobo, Dr. Jackman, the chairman who came in briefly. Thank you to our UTT faculty who made the time to attend. It is crunch time, it is marks, it is exams, and yet they came out. I want to acknowledge our UE representative, Romulo Guedes. Thank you, Romulo, for coming. When the venue changed from Tamina to Point Lisas, it made it really difficult for people to be here. So I really appreciate the effort of those of us who were able to make it down to Point Lisas. To the Caribbean Research Methodologies Network, the CRM, Professor Camille Naki, thank you for getting us together to write this book. And we hope that many more of the academics from UE and the UTT can join the Caribbean Research Methodologies Network. It's online, so very easy to connect. Dr. Jean Butcher-Lashley and Dr. Kelly is not here physically, but I would still like to acknowledge the efforts that they made to get their readings to us in video.
Thank you, Nisha. We thank Nisha for her reading. I want to thank my 4 UTT first-year students. Where are they? Come on, Chelsea, Brianna, Jelani, Amara. I know that they're very excited to be here. I'm not seeing them, but we want to thank them for coming, and they're coming as far as Le Bray and all of these areas to be here. And it's good when our first-year students show such interest in things like these. I'm not too sure if our panelist is here. Did he ever come? All right, so at Chelsea, where's everyone? We want people to see you all come. These are my first-year psychology students, Chelsea, Amara, Brianna, and Jelani. Thank you very much for giving of your services to us. We want to thank our panelists who will entertain us as we have our refreshments. I want to thank our sponsors, and we have had 2 sponsors for this evening, Hadco and Blue Waters. And I want to thank Mr. Jonathan Chatur, who was very instrumental in getting them. Thank you. We want to thank UTT Corpcom, who worked really well alongside us. Mr. Ricardo Williams, Omari, Mr. King, Janelle, all of these people, thank you very much. I want to thank you, the audience, those who are looking on, all of our virtual audience, thank you for being here, and all of you who made the trip to Point Lisas. Let's give you a big round of applause. All our friends, all of our well-wishers, thank you very much. So as we proceed, we have to be out of this space about 4:30, 4:45, but we have 2 things that are going to be happening. One, the sale of the books, and I would invite all of you to please go next door. We have lots of food, we want you to eat it. We have ice cream, we have lots of refreshments. So again, thank you very much for being here. Yes? All right then, so thank you very much for being here, and I will see you next door. Take care.